The Israelis attacked Egypt on June 5, 1967, starting the Six-Day War, which ended on June 10th with the Israelis taking over the land of Sinai from the Egyptians. The Egyptians then surprise attacked the Israelis on October 6, 1973. This war is known as the Yom Kippur War, the result of which was that the Egyptians had gained a portion of Sinai back. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger had a peace mission in the Middle East. His work in promoting a peace agreement between Israel and Egypt put an end to the Yom Kippur War in 1973 and laid the foundation for President Jimmy Carter's meetings at Camp David in 1978. Having won the last war, Sadat made a decision that astounded the entire world.
وستدهش إسرائيل إنما تسمعني لا أقول أمامكم أنني مستعد أن أذهب إلى بيتهم إلى الكنيسة ذات ومناقشتهم.
President Sadat landed in Tel Aviv on November 19, 1977. He went to speak at the Knesset to extend an offer of peace to the Israelis.
لقد جئت إليكم لكي نبني معا السلام الدائم العادل حتى لا تراق نقطة واحدة من دم أي الطرفين.
A courageous decision on his part, a remarkable decision on his part. If it has helped, I guess I would look upon it this way. Let's look upon it from his perspective. I think that he recognized this was very risky and possibly life-threatening. He had no illusions about those things.
As a result of his visit, President Carter summoned Egypt's Sadat and Israel's Begin in 1978 for a 13-day negotiating session at Camp David, Maryland, the White House's presidential retreat. At the beginning of the summit on September 5th, Carter wrote, "It was extremely unusual for heads of state to engage in a summit meeting at which the outcome was so much in doubt. Not only had Egypt and Israel been at war for decades, but the personality differences of the leaders promised to complicate the dialogue." To conclude the almost 2 weeks of negotiations, President Carter sent a note to President Sadat and Prime Minister Begin stating, "We are approaching the final shape of our negotiations. With your approval, I propose that today we receive your most constructive recommendations, that tomorrow, Saturday, be devoted to drafting efforts, and that we can conclude the meeting at Camp David at some time during the following day." On September 17, 1978, the negotiations ended successfully. However, there were many sacrifices that had to be made. Sadat's advisor, Mohammed Ibrahim Kamel, was not particularly excited about the new relationship between Egypt and Israel. Sadat did not change his mind, causing Kamel, among many others, to resign from working with Sadat. On March 26, 1979, Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, and U.S. President Jimmy Carter revised the conditions of the peace treaty. The conditions of the peace treaty included the return of East Jerusalem and Gaza to Palestine and stopping further Israeli settlements in those areas. The signing of the peace treaty in the garden of the White House was witnessed by President Jimmy Carter. This historical peace treaty was the first between Israel and any of its neighboring countries. It seemed miraculous, but it was only a first step on a long and difficult road, as President Carter stated.
So let us now lay aside war. Let us now reward all the children of Abraham who hunger for a comprehensive peace in the Middle East. Let us now enjoy the adventure of becoming fully human, fully neighbors, even brothers and sisters. We pray God together that these dreams will come true. I believe they will.
This led to Sadat, Begin, and Carter's winning of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1978. The Arab nations were invited to reach an agreement with Israel, but aside from Egypt, they all refused. The Camp David Accords was seen by the majority of Egyptians and all Arabs as a stab in the back because the Egyptians could no longer help the Palestinians. It left the Palestinians standing alone in the face of the Israeli army. The Israelis welcomed the offer of peace. In particular, Israeli businessmen welcomed the end of an Arab embargo.
Many of them were, business community especially, was happy to be able to break out of an Arab embargo and develop relations with their neighbors, and leading to a peace treaty with Jordan. But all this, came to a halt. And the business community today in Israel seems to be, perfectly happy to be isolated in a, kind of a ghetto, protected by a wall, because their most dynamic businesses are high tech, and they're dealing outside the region with the world economy.
A large sum of the Egyptian budget had been directed to developing its military powers in preparation for ongoing war with Israel. By signing the peace treaty, this budget would be directed to economic development in Egypt. Sadat's decision to sign the peace treaty cost him his life. On October 6, 1981, during the annual celebration of the Yom Kippur victory, members of the Egyptian armed forces opened fire on the presidential stand, killing Sadat and injuring many others. Although the outcome is not the same as was expected 32 years ago when the treaty was signed, the Camp David Accords remains a major historical turning point in the Middle East conflict.
What's going to happen now, I don't know. But as you all realize, that the effort by the United States to bring peace between Israel and its neighbors is completely at a stalemate. Nothing is happening. And that's not an exaggeration. It's completely dead in the water. Because what President Obama demanded in Egypt, in Cairo, shortly after being inaugurated, about ending the settlements, was completely ignored by the Israelis. They are madly building settlements now, all over Palestine, except for Gaza, of course.
On January 25, 2011, an Egyptian revolution began, leaving everyone wondering about the fate of the peace treaty. In a world fraught with war, the Camp David Accords stands as an example of the change that can be brought about by negotiation and diplomacy, regardless of whether one would agree or disagree with its outcome.